It is the 23rd of the 10th, 2024. The time is 10:07, and there are several items on the F1 news cycle docket that we need to address. We've got to talk Lewis Hamilton saying that he's never spun in his life before. Surprising outcomes there. So too, we've got to talk about mini DRS clarification, even that nobody is talking about. Ferrari seeker upgrades. Colapinto on the front cover of Mexican Forbes. Martin Brundle's assessment of Lando Norris and Verstappen gate. And so too, of course, we've got to talk about one Checo Perez becoming champion. Let's address mini DRS first and foremost. Champion of what, says Rafa? Champion of the world, of course. Go on then. Red Bull thinks that the FIA's mini DRS clarification has impacted the F1 Formbook, writes one Jonathan Noble of Motorsport. And this is where it gets techie. Because of course we have divergence. Not all F1 teams will agree, nor will they say the same thing. There is divergence on this. Lest we forget, at this weekend's Grand Prix, Zach Brown said that they had to make an adjustment to their mini DRS, that slot gap that Oscar Piastri had leveraged to an ultimate victory at Singapore. That they had to make an adjustment at Singapore. Christian Horner, when asked about this, said, yeah, they made an adjustment at Singapore, but there was an additional clarification by the regulatory body, that is the FIA, meaning, therefore, that they needed to make an additional adjustment at the USA Grand Prix too. Who's telling porkies? Who's telling the truth? Some say that there's three versions of events, right? Yours, mine, and then the truth, and you can't make it out right. F1 being a piranha tank, I wouldn't be surprised if they're all lined, you know what I mean? Jonathan Noble writes that this has reached peak at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix when McLaren's mini DRS came under scrutiny from rival teams and the FIA. While that rear wing passed the static load test, it subsequently emerged that the FIA expressed its belief it was pushing the boundaries of flexibility too much, and McLaren subsequently agreed to change their wing. What are the FIA doing? If you have a test and the wing passed the test, then that means that it's legal now. Am I missing something? Isn't this what they said on the back of Singapore when Oscar Piastri won that race? So what's changed? You just can't invest in FIA PLC, right? They change more frequently and often than the weather. What's the point in the load test if indeed it doesn't measure out or filtrate out for illegal wins? What are we doing here? And this is why flexible wing gate will continue. What do we do? Oh dear. Jonathan Noble writes, it's all about marginal gains, says Christian Horner. That's what Formula One is all about. So yes, inevitably there will be a difference from it to the FI clarification. How material McLaren's loss in place will vary from circuit to circuit. You will recall that around Singapore, that means a lot, right? The power of DRS is overpowered indeed. So too at COTA. But when you look at it, the proof is in the pudding, right? McLaren were like 60 seconds down the road previously. And then now it feels like some of that advantage has withered away. You could argue that they were one of the quickest, but the quickest at the USA Grand Prix, probably not. That, I feel, would fall to Charles Leclerc's Scuderia Ferrari. Of this circumstance, team principal of McLaren, Andrea Stella, had this to say. Our rear wing was adjusted after Baku following some of the conversation we have had, and with the FIA, the regulatory body, providing some reference as to what they would like to see. But it's really minor, wouldn't make any difference. It's an element in terms of the car performance, but minor, smaller, not major. It does not have to do with the performance switch from event to event. Certainly there were some other teams, says Andrea Stella, who would have had to make similar adjustments. It's Flexigate. Expect it, ladies and gentlemen, to run on and on. There is news about Audi, but I want to touch on this later, give it the proper time, because many people are saying that Audi are desperate to come out of F1, that in doing their due diligence, or not as it may be, that they hadn't realised how much gap there was between Sauber, as at the time of writing, and the race lead. that Sauber are a gazillion miles behind, and Audi, some of the head honchos, aren't keen to put their name to a project where sponsors on that car are going to disapprove because they are doing nothing but losing. That will be a failure of a project if indeed they kick off in 2026 and aren't getting podiums and victories. All of the head honchos, the senior stakeholders, shareholders at Audi, who were keen to rubber stamp the F1 program, they have now left. So the project that's fallen to one Mattia Binotto and Jonathan Wheatley is going to get very techie going forward, political. But I want to give that the time that it deserves. We'll go deep on that later on. Oh, by the way, Lewis Hamilton crashed, didn't he? Lap 5 at COTA, the USA Grand Prix. And it was uncharacteristic, say some. I looked at that instance in real time and just thought it was just the car being noddy. But so anomalous was that incident. Toto, the boy who cried wolf, team principal of Mercedes, had this to say when apportioning blame. It was 100% that dog of a car, that SH1T box, 0% Lewis Hamilton. That's the reason why he crashed. It was the car, it was not Lewis. Why do you think that, Toto? He was asked. Toto responded thus: Lewis Hamilton does not make those type of mistakes. And then initially you can look at Toto, the boy who cried wolf, who's made many promises, said many things before the F1's press and media, and some of those need fact checking, right? Yeah, we'll come back. The W13 is a good concept and we'll make it right. Fact check number 1. Do you know what I mean? And there's been many other examples similar to that. However, in this instance, when you fact check him, it turns out Lewis Hamilton doesn't make those type of mistakes. Can you imagine? I've never spun out before in a race, says Lewis Hamilton. Not that I remember, at least. Cheeky caveat. If I have, it can only be once, maybe. Once in all these gazillion years. And they fact-checked him, haven't they? Race fans. They went and had a look and they said, prior to last weekend, Lewis Hamilton has only spun out by himself in one race. What are we doing? That's chaos. This was on the final lap of the 2009 Italian Grand Prix. He pushed to attack Jensen Button, of course, Jensen Button for second place, and he spun into the barrier on the inside between the two Lesmos. What? Lewis Hamilton has only, in all of his career since 2007, spun out in a race by himself once. There have been many other occasions, writes racefans.net, when Hamilton has retired from a race of his own accord, usually involving accidents with rivals. But this is the I just don't even understand it. Let me start reading this thing. Lewis Hamilton has only spun out of his own accord all these years once. How, Sway? This is just some chaos. Again, it speaks to some say that he's the goatiest one, right? Absolutely will be on the Mount Rushmore of F1 settings. Maybe I need to put some more respect on his name. 39, soon to be 40 years old. Some people are saying that Charles Leclerc, especially in this current form with a car underneath him, capable of winning races and champions, therefore, whose drivability is on 12, will wash him one Sir Lewis Hamilton. But seeing this stat, you know, I'm going to be honest, I'm not so sure anymore. Fast forward to 2025. Let's see. The proof will be in the pudding. And I would estimate thus that Charles Leclerc may have the upper hand over one Sir Lewis, Carl Davidson Hamilton, as has George Russell, first of his name. But in the race, mate, I wouldn't be so fast if I were a betting man to bet against one Sir Lewis Hamilton. Oh, and by the way, Martin Brundle's apparently penned an article on Sky Sports F1 assessing what happened between Lando Norris and Max Verstappen. When talking about it, he said, if Russell was penalised for running Valtteri Bottas wide, then shouldn't Max Verstappen have been? That there is consistent inconsistency across the FIA in the way they institute for the rules. No kidding, Sherlock. And some say that this is Max Verstappen's gift with a view to exploit that. Again, for the avoidance of doubt, this is Cameron CC speaking. Don't hate the player, hate the game. Brundle continues, it's even more complicated than that. Norris running wide was his fourth track limit indiscretion, which means that he got a penalty. He could have got a penalty for just running wide. You can't have that many indiscretions, right? 3 strikes and you're out. You'll get a cheeky black flag. It's even more complicated than that. Norris running wide was his 4th track limit indiscretion, which means an automatic 5-second penalty. It seems inconceivable to me, says Brundle, that if a driver is forced wide, that counts as a limit strike. But I'm assured by stewards that it does. But Norris wasn't given an extra 5-second track limits penalty because that would have been considered double jeopardy with his penalty for overtaking off the track, which he undoubtedly did. That was a universally agreed upon decision in race control. What are we doing here? I get sick and tired. Listen, all I know is this. I think all the 20 drivers on the grid need to get their arms around this process. This needs to be a negotiation. You know, like you used to see with Charlie Whiting. Charlie Whiting back in the day would have conversations with the driver and corral them, rein them back in. Indeed, very famously, one was had between Charlie and Maximilian Verstappen. That seems to have gone away, right? Where has that gone to? And if indeed it has gone, then we need to bring that back in. This needs to be a negotiation in real time. And in the meantime, the other 19 on the grid need to understand the modus operandi. Listen, this is not line by line. These guys aren't doing 2 decimal place rules. This is common law settings. Past is prologue. If you're overtaking on the inside and you get your nose in front at the apex, then you have, you know what I mean? You've carte blanche. You can do whatever you want to in real time. And the other 19, not named Maximilian Verstappen, they want to get around this, don't they? Realise this in real time, lest they be doomed to lose themselves 25 points each and every single race. Daniel says Max knows the rules. If they don't like it, they should change the rules, not Max Verstappen. Okay, Daniel, you've articulated my point more succinctly than me. Oh, and by the way, I've got to talk about some Ferrari, haven't we? Because Ferrari apparently, and again, another news item that's flown underneath the radar. Why were they so quick? Well, there's a couple different threads at which we can pull. It's not like they turned up to USA GP and then all of a sudden were quick. They were rapid in Singapore. You could make the hypothetical argument that but for McLaren's cheeky mini DRS, that there's no way Oscar Piastri would have been able to hold off a charging Charles Leclerc, ergo around Singapore, which again, if past his prologue, Ferrari are always quick around there. But at Singapore, that package was quick. For the first time, both in absolute terms performance, speed and drivability, and that's Charles Leclerc's wheelhouse, right? He's god tier in those circumstances, but there was a story behind that we weren't told. Why? Because Ferrari didn't declare the bloody parts. When asked about Ferrari's lack of named updates, Frederick Vasseur simply said, "You have to be creative." Dude is getting slight underhanded. It's not that we don't declare something, then that means that we don't bring any updates or innovations. What we declare are only the changes to the external shapes of the humanity. There's a report from Formula Passions that suggests that work might have been done at Ferrari, Scuderia, Maranello factory on the car's suspension springs and shock absorbers with a view to bake into that car both absolute terms pace and of course drivability. Both parts would have been essential, Formula Passion reports, for keeping the chassis stable, which would have helped retain a constant ground clearance at a notoriously bumpy track. Bloody Nora. This, according to the report, led to better compromise between mechanical grip and aerodynamic load and relates to the sacrifice Ferrari made when it came to setting up their car for the race. So Ferrari bought something, yeah, undeclared, but that's why they were so quick, right? Charles Leclerc down the road, I reckon he could have been 30 seconds down the road if he'd kept pushing his car during that final stint. It was easy for both messers, Leclerc and Sainz. Oh, and by the way, Checo Perez's dad has said that Checo can be a champion still, addressing, of course, the rumours that as at October 27th, Checo Perez might call it a day, hang up his Nomex, retire, brilliantly optic, retire at his home Grand Prix, the Mexican Grand Prix. And that's techie because, of course, there's performance, there's pressure around his not insubstantial underperformance season today. He's been nowhere right. word on the F1 curb is that Checo Perez has been in breach of performance clauses in his contract. Lest we forget that Red Bull didn't even want to extend his contract for another year. Currently, his contract is due to expire at the end of 2025. The only way he got that extension was if the performance clause could be affected in real time. Checo Perez argued that no, listen, if I'm extending my contract, then 2025 should be when these performance clauses kick in. And those performance clauses stated that it could be no more than 100 points or 100 points behind one Maximilian Verstappen, his teammate, and 5 places behind Max Verstappen in the championship as at the summer break. And he was in breach of both. He's not been great, Checo Perez. And again, far be it for me to be able to slander the dude, because if me and him jumped in a car, of course, he would run rings around me. But this is F1. This isn't noddy karting, Cameron. This is high-level motorsports, and you would argue that Checo Perez should have been sacked if indeed meritocracy is a thing in Formula One. Checo Perez's dad, though, bless him, having just undergone a serious health incident, says that he thinks Checo Perez is still going to win a champion. Interviewing with a Mexican outlet Record, Checo Perez, his father, Antonio Perez Garibay, said as follows: the best of Checo Perez is yet to come. I am sure even that in due time Checo will have the weapons and tools to fight for the championship. I'm excited, and I can say that Checo can be a world champion. What's he talking about here, chat? Miami, what's he on about? Kayla, help me make this make sense. Is Checo Perez's dad alluding to the fact that he might be driving an Audi as soon as 2025? Is that what he's saying? Because that would make more sense than saying that he hasn't had the tools requisite to win a championship. He's been driving the same car as Maximilian Verstappen all this time. Oh, and by the way, Max is champion in 21, 22, 23 and soon to be 24. So what are we talking about? Is he implying that there is a conspiracy theory that Checo Perez doesn't have the same machinery as Max? I don't understand. What is he talking about? That he's going to be champion soon. He might not even be in F1 soon. Antonio Perez Garibay. He may not. If word on the F1 curb is to be believed, he could retire as at October the 27th night. That might even be the best option for him. And with the guys, the rookie era ensuing, the likes of Colapinto, Lawson, Yuki Tsunoda are surrounding him, making his life more difficult. Therefore, not to mention one Franco Colapinto, probably making Checo Perez's life more difficult than anybody. I spoke to this on the stream yesterday, and this is getting techie for Checo Perez. Why? Because Colapinto is of Latin American descent, Argentina settings, Carlos Reutemann, Juan Manuel Fangio settings. There is heritage in there. This dude looks like Ayrton Senna even. Hide your girlfriends from this chap. He's doing bits. Again, absolutely pulverising one Alex Albon, notwithstanding the fact that he's brand new in Formula One. This has to mean something. Franco Colapinto, for the avoidance of doubt, doesn't, as at the time of writing, have himself a drive for 2025. That will be remedied soon, and I have a feeling that Christian Horner will want to get himself in the Franco Colapinto business. Argentina are rallying around their guy. Latin America too. Check out this. In Brazil in a few weeks' time, there will be a gazillion Argentinian flags in that crowd. 100%. They will be rooting for their guy. Oh, and by the way, as if that won't cheese off Checo Perez and put enough pressure on his not insubstantial shoulders, this week, again, very marketable, is Franco Colapinto. Super good looking Ayrton Senna settings. This week, Franco Colapinto is on the front cover of Mexican Forbes. Checo Perez will not be loving this, for it feels like he's been suffocating his career. Again, stay of execution settings, if indeed Franco Colapinto has anything to do with it. How, ladies and gentlemen, do you like yourself some Mexican Formula One?